Today we are going to talk about the least common multiple. Here are some helpful definitions. A multiple is the product of a given whole number and another whole number. An example is, here are some multiples of 6. 6, 12, 18, and 24. As you can see, you're taking the number 6 and multiplying it by 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you would continue to do that to list more multiples. A common multiple is a multiple of one number that is also the multiple of a second number. So for example, if I was comparing the multiples of 4 and 6, I would list maybe the first 6 multiples of 4, the first 6 multiples of 6, and find what multiples they have in common. So, as I was saying, if I had 4 and 6, 4 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 times 6. If I'm doing 6 times 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5. And I would look for any multiples that they have in common. So here they have in common 12 and 24. 12 and 24 are common multiples. Now that brings us to the least common multiple. The least common multiple is the least number that is a common multiple of 2 or more numbers. So if we use the 4 and 6 example, the least common multiple would be 12 because it is the lowest or least multiple that they have in common. Please write these definitions and examples in your math notes. Let's look at an example. This says list the first 6 multiples of each number. Now, we already did 4 before, but we could do it again. So 4 times 1 is 4, times 2, times 3, times 4, times 5. Oops, I'm thinking back to 6 here. Times 5, and times 6. Now let's list the first 6 multiples of 8. Times 1, times 2, times 3, times 4, times 5, times 6. Now, we're going to use a strategy similar to what we just did to find the least common multiple for these sets of numbers. So here again we have 4 and 6. So this mirrors the example we did earlier, but what you want to do is you want to list multiples until you find one they have in common. Sometimes you look at 2 numbers and you know what the least common multiple is going to be. But just to check, make sure you start writing some of the multiples in order to make sure that you can find it. If you're not sure, it's always helpful, like the example of 4, to write the first 6 multiples and see if there's anything in common. Here, as I'm writing the multiples, I already see that 12 is going to be the least one that they have in common. Now remember, 2 numbers can have other common multiples, but here we're looking for the least one. So I can stop here because I have already found the least common multiple. Sometimes you'll need to go on to even 7, 8, 9, or 10 multiples before you can find the least common one. This one's pretty easy. So here, the least common multiple is going to be 12. Now, as you saw in the beginning, this is a prerequisite skill for fractions. The reason for that is finding the least common multiple is going to help us when we're adding and subtracting fractions by assisting us in finding the least common denominator. Now, we're going to try to find the least common multiple of 3, 6, and 9. So, I'm going to start by listing the factors of these numbers. So again, it's better to start maybe listing 6 factors, I'm sorry, not factors, but multiples, 6 multiples of the number to kind of get you started. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 18. Oops, missed one. Okay, we have 6, 12, and 9 times 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 times 6. Okay. Now we want to look for the ones they have in common, but here we're looking for the least common one. So no 3s, not everything has a 6, not everything has a 9. We got a 12 for 3 and 6, but the one I noticed that they all have in common, that is the lowest that they all have in common, is 18. So the least common multiple of 3, 6, and 9 is 18. Now, pause the video and in your math notebook, try problems 1, 2, and 3 on your own. After you've done that, then press play on the video to see how you did on these problems. Okay, let's try. For number 1, it just says to list the first 6 multiples of the number 7. So we have 7 times 1, times 2, times 3, times 4, times 5, times 6. And that's it. Now remember, multiples and factors are very different. Multiples is like you see here, where factors of 7 would be only 1 and 7. They are numbers that will multiply together to get 7. Now it says to write the least common multiple for each pair of numbers. For number 2, we have the numbers 4 and 8. So we're going to start by listing the multiples of 4 and 8. We have 4, 8, 12. Okay, had a visitor, so I'm trying to pick up where I left off here. So let's look at our multiples of 4. So we have 4, 8, 12. Now, we could keep going all the way to 6 multiples or even more, but because I know my basic facts pretty well, I know that my least common multiple is going to be coming up pretty soon here. So if I list my multiples of 8, 8, 16. Okay, so again, I now have a common multiple, which is 8. It is the lowest possible one we can have, so the LCM of 4 and 8 is 8. Now, let's look at number 3. We need to find the least common multiple for 2, 3, and 6. So, I'm going to start listing some of my multiples of 2. 2 times 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5, etc. 3 times 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5. Okay. 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3. Okay. So, right now, I am seeing a multiple we have in common. Here is the lowest possible one because 2, 4, or 3 are not in all 3 numbers. So the least common multiple here is 6. Now again, there are common multiples between 2, 3, and 6. If we kept going, we would see that 12 is a common multiple also, but we're looking for the one that's the least. Also, I listed multiples for each one of these numbers. Now, if you knew that it was 6, I want to make sure that you please show your work to show that it is up to 6, but you don't have to go quite as far as I did on this one. So you can list multiples until you need to find it. Again, sometimes it's not going to go all the way up to 6 multiples. Sometimes you're going to be going 7, 8, 9, and so on and so forth until you find it. All right, thanks for watching.